Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said Monday fully vaccinated people can safely gather together in small groups without masks as long as everyone involved is at low risk for severe COVID-19. This is CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky.
With more and more people getting vaccinated each day, we are starting to turn a corner. And as more Americans are vaccinated, a growing body of evidence now tells us that there are some activities that fully vaccinated people can resume at low risk to themselves.
The CDC is still advising against long-distance travel, even for fully vaccinated people. It's not yet known how likely it is for vaccinated people to spread coronavirus, perhaps as asymptomatic carriers. The new recommendation came as the number of U.S. residents who've received at least one dose of a vaccine reached 60 million. Over 700 new COVID-19 deaths were reported across the U.S. Monday, pushing the U.S. death toll over the past year to more than 525,000. Tomorrow, Texas is set to end its statewide mask mandate. We'll speak to a long hauler, a doctor recovering from COVID, later in the broadcast. Italy's passed 100,000 confirmed COVID-19 deaths, the second European country after the UK to reach that toll. In Peru, a 104-year-old woman on Monday became that nation's first elderly person vaccinated against COVID. Peru's recorded nearly 50,000 deaths from the disease, though the true numbers likely significantly higher. Vietnam also rolled out its vaccination campaign Monday. Vietnam has recorded just 2,500 cases and 35 deaths from COVID-19 after running one of the world's most successful public health campaigns of the pandemic. Meanwhile, Cuba's begun late-stage trials of its Soberana 2 vaccine, with 44,000 volunteers receiving shots this week. It's the first vaccine candidate produced in Latin America to make it to Phase 2 trial. In Minnesota, jury selection in the murder trial of the former Minneapolis white police officer who killed George Floyd was called off Monday after an appeals court ordered the trial judge consider reinstating a third-degree murder charge against him. The judge plans to move forward with jury selection today unless ordered by the appeals court to halt the process. Derek Chauvin faces second-degree murder and manslaughter charges for killing George Floyd, African-American father, by kneeling on his neck for more than 9 minutes on May 25, 2020. Meanwhile, Chauvin is also facing possible federal charges. The New York Times recently revealed a federal grand jury in Minneapolis has been hearing from witnesses. After headlines will go to Minneapolis for the latest on the Derek Chauvin murder trial. In Kentucky, a judge has permanently dismissed all charges against Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, for allegedly shooting and wounding a police officer serving a no-knock warrant in Breonna Taylor's home last March. Walker has said the officers never identified themselves before entering the home and never attempted to save Taylor as she lay dying after she was struck by a hail of police gunfire. Last September, a grand jury failed to charge any of the 3 white Louisville police officers involved in the killing of Breonna Taylor with her death. In immigration news, a record 3,200 children are being detained at U.S. Border Patrol facilities that resemble jail cells, with nearly half of them held for longer than the legal limit of 3 days. This comes as immigrant justice advocates are denouncing the Biden administration's ongoing detention of unaccompanied children who are being held at government facilities, separated from their families for weeks on end. The children usually arrive at the U.S.-Mexico border with a family member but are separated from them until federal officials confirm they are relatives. Meanwhile, the Biden administration's granted temporary protected status to thousands of Venezuelans living in the U.S. The relief is expected to impact over 300,000 people. The federal government also plans to review its sanctions on Venezuela. An economic and humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, greatly exacerbated by sanctions imposed by the U.S. government, has forced over 5 million people to flee in recent years. Last month, a report published by a UN special rapporteur said the sanctions, quote, constitute violations of international law and inflict, quote, a devastating effect on the broad scope of human rights, especially the right to food, right to health, right to life, right to education, and right to development. In Brazil, a judge has annulled all convictions against former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. In 2018, Lula was sentenced to 12 years in prison over a disputed corruption and money laundering conviction handed down by the conservative judge Sergio Moro, a former ally of the far-right Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. Moro allegedly colluded with prosecutors to seek Lula's conviction. Lula has long maintained his innocence and has vowed to challenge Bolsonaro in the 2022 elections. At the time of his imprisonment, Lula was leading the presidential polls. To see our interview with Lula, go to democracynow.org. New York Attorney General Letitia James has named 2 attorneys to lead an inquiry into sexual harassment allegations against New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. They're former federal prosecutor June Kim and Ann Clark, an employment discrimination attorney. Cuomo has resisted calls he stepped down, including from prominent New York Democrats, after at least 4 women accused him of inappropriate verbal and physical conduct. Meanwhile, the Crown Publishing Group told the New York Times Monday it'll stop promoting and printing Governor Cuomo's book about New York's coronavirus outbreak. Sales of American Crisis: Leadership Lessons from the COVID-19 Pandemic were already plummeting following reports Cuomo's aides pressured state health officials to cover up the true number of COVID-19 deaths in New York's nursing homes. Missouri's long-serving Republican Senator Roy Blunt said Monday he'll not run for re-election in 2022 when his term expires. He's the 5th incumbent Republican senator to announce plans not to run again, with 2 others, Wisconsin's Ron Johnson and Iowa's 87-year-old Chuck Grassley, still undeclared. Georgia's state Senate has approved legislation that would end the right to voters to cast absentee ballots without excuses while toughening voter ID requirements. It's one of more than 250 voter suppression laws being pushed by Republicans in state legislatures around the U.S. in the wake of the 2020 election. On Monday, Iowa's Republican Governor Kim Reynolds signed a voter suppression bill that limits Iowa's early voting period and closes polls 1 hour earlier on Election Day. Elsewhere in Iowa, a trial got underway Monday for a Des Moines Register reporter who was arrested last year while covering a Black Lives Matter protest. Andrea Sahuri streamed this video from the back of a police wagon May 31st, 2020, shortly after she was arrested while covering clashes between police and protesters in Des Moines.
I was saying, I'm pressed. Police deliberately took me, sprayed pepper spray on my face, and then put me in zip ties. What are they called? Zip ties. I'm just doing my job as a journalist.
A police officer who testified at Sahuri's trial said he did not realize she was a reporter. Meanwhile, prosecutors have said Sahuri's status as a journalist is irrelevant to her charges and arrest. Amnesty International responded in a statement, quote, "Treating media work as a crime is a human rights violation." South Dakota's Republican Governor Kristi Noem said Monday she's excited to sign a bill barring transgender women and girls from competing in high school and college sports. Mississippi Republican Governor Tate Reeves has promised to sign similar legislation in Mississippi. South Dakota's ACLU chapter responded, quote, "The danger this legislation creates is real. The potential harm to South Dakota is significant, and the stakes for transgender students are high. Kids are hurting," they said. And massive women-led marches were held around the world Monday to commemorate International Women's Day. In Mexico, thousands of women from across the country gathered in Mexico City's Zócalo protesting skyrocketing femicides. They're also blasting President Andrés Manuel López Obrador for supporting a gubernatorial candidate for the state of Guerrero who's accused of rape. Protesters were met by police who used tear gas and batons to try to disperse the crowd. This is one of the protesters.
My name is Mercedes Yamilet Hernandez. I am proud to be a Mexican woman. I come here for all the women they have taken away from us, for every girl they have killed. I was raped from age 4 to age 9, and my family just defended my attacker. The state also defended him. Today I also come for my friend who has disappeared. I am proud to be here to just scream. This has to end. They have to stop killing us, raping us, and assaulting us, and they just keep doing it. The pandemic has not stopped them from acting this way. They just don't care.
In Guatemala, hundreds of women and girls led marches and ceremonies in different parts of Guatemala demanding justice for victims of femicides and survivors of violence. Women also marked the 4th-year anniversary of the death of 41 girls who were burnt alive at an orphanage near Guatemala City after they protested sexual and physical violence at the facility. Massive marches also took place in La Paz, Bolivia, and Istanbul, Turkey, where thousands took to the streets, including Uyghur women and girls who led a demonstration protesting China's treatment of Uyghurs. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by my co-host Juan Gonzalez in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.